Hey, Clemson family, let's talk a little about potential conference realignment and Clemson's path to more revenue in or out of the ACC. We're also going to look at the latest with the men's basketball team.
I'm Daniel Shirley. We'll break down the safeties and take a look at a really difficult weekend for the baseball team.
It happens sometimes. I'm Bill Zimmerman. Welcome to everyone joining us on youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff and on the major podcast apps. This is episode 65 of the Reign Supreme All Way podcast. Follow us on social media too. We're at Clemson Kickoff on Twitter and on Instagram. Let's go ahead and get into realignment. I think it's been the biggest story of the month of February for college football offseason, with February signing day kind of diminished from what it used to be. And a lot of it focused on a board of trustees meeting at Florida State University and athletic director Michael Alford, who had some strong words.
Yeah, that was kind of the story of the weekend, wasn't it? The big numbers that were tossed around. There was a lot of talk that Alford was kind of laying out Florida State's path to get out of the ACC. I don't know that it was quite that strong because I think there's still a couple of more steps there. But it was really kind of, Bill, the first time we've heard an ACC administrator talk about these things in such specific numbers.
A lot of tweets Friday morning talking about the $120 million buyout figure that was quoted in that board of trustees meeting. That, of course, would only get you out of the conference. You still very likely would concede your media rights. That's what happened to Maryland. I know there's been some speculation from Tony Siracusa at Last Word on Sports with some legal consult saying there is a way out of that if it's not mutually beneficial in essence, and that if you're trailing the Big Ten and the SEC that significantly in revenue, which, as Alford put it, was about $30 million behind those two conferences' new media rights deals, suddenly there's no mutual benefit there, right? Most other media organizations have not said that. Maryland certainly never found a way out of that. So even though that's a very tempting solution, it's hard to imagine Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, anybody getting out of the ACC before its media deal is done in 2036 because of that grant of rights being such a bulk of revenue to all the programs. Maybe the biggest solution there is for unequal revenue distribution, something that Alford mentioned, something that Clemson Athletic Director Graham Neff has been talking about publicly, that it would help, that it would keep the top schools involved in the ACC, that is mutually beneficial, keeps bringing more revenue in, and there's a path there perhaps to keep more of what you generate if you're a top school, bringing in big ratings, bringing in playoff bonuses, bringing in more money, keep more of it.
That's kind of a new idea that we've heard from these universities the last few years. But look, the Big 12 did that, and Oklahoma and Texas still left. So would that keep these schools in the ACC? Again, I don't know. We can't know for sure what these schools are looking at because it really is such a strange dynamic that we have right now with the realignment that we've seen the last couple of years with Texas and Oklahoma moving and USC and UCLA moving. It seems like, Bill, everything is on the table right now. And if you wanted, let's say Clemson got out of the media deal, well, then you have to have somewhere that wants you too. I mean, that's another thing that has to be addressed here. And, I know in the pro sports, we love talking about, hey, we should trade this guy. And on draft night, hey, make a trade. Well, you have to have a partner to make a trade. And if Clemson and Florida State or whoever wanted to get out of the ACC, boy, they better have some assurance that somebody else is going to want them. And I don't know that is 100% the case. I mean, we'd have to find out, but I just don't know that the SEC is automatically going to want Clemson and Florida State if they did get out of the ACC.
It would make sense to me the SEC would want Florida State, would want Clemson, because they do bring big ratings, and that is starting to matter a little more than it used to. It's not entirely about bring me a market, right? Well, the Gators are already bringing the SEC all the markets that the Seminoles could bring them. South Carolina arguably already bringing the SEC all the markets that Clemson could bring them. However, now it's becoming a little more, it's not all the way there yet, but it's becoming a little more about ratings, about regardless of market, how many eyeballs are you bringing us week to week on average for your games? And Clemson and Florida State have a very high average there. They have large alumni bases, maybe not some of the biggest. Clemson certainly not as large as Florida State. The quality of the product matters right now. And Clemson, largely consistent. I mean, you and I remember the Tommy West era, the end of the Ken Hatfield era, early in the Tommy Bowden era. But ever since you started seeing Sammy Watkins, CJ Spiller make a lot of highlight reels on SportsCenter, people have been watching Clemson for a good while now. They were watching Clemson a lot in the 80s and 90s. This is a brand that carries a lot of strength. It carries a lot of interest among the football watching public. And that's something that a conference can market. Now, I think the Big 12 would stand to gain more, especially while cable markets still do have a presence in the financial picture for conferences, because they don't have Atlanta. They don't have Miami and Orlando and Tampa. They don't have Charlotte. They don't have Greenville, which is a bigger market than it used to be. That gives them that entry. UCF has them there somewhere in some ways, but the size of that student body has not been large as long as Florida State's. You have to wonder if the Big 12 is all that interested at this time, because they did add UCF. They also added Cincinnati. The Pac-12 is kind of struggling right now. A lot of schools rumored to be looking for new landing spots. And if you go back a couple of years ago to former Clemson University president James Barker talking on a podcast with Larry Williams, the Clemson Dubcast, which is a really good long-form podcast, highly recommend it. Listen to it a lot myself. He talked years ago about getting Pac-12 schools involved in the ACC. Yeah, the travel is a hurdle. Yeah, there are troubles with that as far as logistics. There's certainly no tradition there. I don't know, maybe Clemson winning a national championship in San Francisco helps tiny little bit, right? But not a brand new idea. Certainly schools are looking. The hurdle there then is if you get those Pac-12 schools wanting to join the ACC's deal doesn't have any clause in there to get new revenue by adding more teams. That's probably one of the reasons, in addition to Notre Dame's sense of tradition of being independent, that you haven't seen the Irish become a full member of the ACC. Just hurdles everywhere you look for a solution.
Yeah, there's no easy solution, because if there was one, it would have been already pulled out of the hat, right? And we would have seen something happen with this conference. It's almost like the ACC is hurt and helped by its TV deal, right? It has kept the conference together. It has kept these schools in the conference, but they can't take a step forward and do anything right now because of the deal that they have. So it's a plus and a minus in both ways, in a big way, both ways. But I really would love to see something with the ACC and the Pac-12. I just would. I don't know if that's the right solution. I don't know if that saves the ACC, quote unquote. I'm doing air quotes. I know you can't see that, but I don't know that would save the conference. But man, you just want to see some forward thinking, and you want to see them get out ahead of this a little bit. And if you could get the Pac-12 and the ACC together as one quote conference, and Clemson's playing Oregon, or Clemson's playing Stanford, or Washington, or Arizona, or Utah, or hell, let Coach Prime come to Clemson and coach a game with Colorado. How great would that be? I think that would be a really good solution to all of these problems that the ACC's having right now.
I didn't like it the last time primetime was.
No, I did not.
Clemson, so. Here's the other thing that I won't say, the sky is falling, because you hear a lot of, oh, wow, we're not finding a solution to this, then the program is dying. Well, the program is not dying, and look no farther than Atlanta for proof of what's changing. The other factor here is networks are struggling to monetize this content on air the way that they used to. The regional sports networks in baseball, especially the Bally regional sports networks, already looking at filing for bankruptcy. That is being discussed publicly. Also, rumors that a few teams would be affected if Warner Brothers division were to file for bankruptcy. That also involves some regional sports broadcasting. I'm not sure that these rates are going to stay where they are. I kind of believe that as these latest deals with the Big Ten and the SEC expire, and the Big Ten's deal is only 7 years, which starts this July, you're not necessarily talking about being $30 million a year behind them until 2036. You're certainly talking about being $30 million a year behind them until that deal is done 7 years from now. The SEC deal, by the way, lasts 10 years, so they've got a little more shelf life on theirs. If that unequal revenue distribution kicks in before then and helps narrow that gap, then when the Big Ten signs its next deal, that gap isn't as big as it used to be. Yeah, you don't ever want to be behind. I get it. It does hurt some of the things that you can do for your athletics program, especially at Clemson, starting lacrosse, starting gymnastics, recently starting softball, a lot of facilities under construction. Yeah, your finances are finite, and especially at a school, the student body size of Clemson, the alumni base size of Clemson. But this isn't, oh my gosh, we're never going to be the same again. This is a storm that needs to be weathered, and it can be weathered, and it doesn't necessarily last for another 14 football seasons.
At some point, the money reaches its limit, and there's only so much out there that these TV networks are going to want to throw at these colleges and these conferences for the product, right? I mean, go to another sport, go to NASCAR. Look what NASCAR did 20 years ago, where it went outside of its fan base and it tried to move into the quote future, and it really damaged itself, and the money just wasn't there. So at some point you have to realize, okay, this is the money, this is all we're going to get, and there'll be another deal after the current ones, but I don't know that the explosion is going to continue. It can't stay at that level and continue to get more and more and more every time. It's just not possible.
One other silver lining here, and again, I'm not saying that trailing by $30 million a year for 7 years is a good thing. I'm not going to try to put lipstick on a pig that way. But another silver lining here is the ACC network and the ACC digital network do a very nice job of getting a lot of content out there in front of people online. If you're already in front of those eyeballs, I mean, there's certainly more ways that they get things out online than the SEC does necessarily. I'm not talking just about Twitter and Instagram and what the schools do for themselves. What the conference does also gets more people involved. There are some advantages to what the ACC network has available. Let's stay on top of things as they develop, and especially in reference to unequal revenue sharing and Clemson being able to get a bigger slice of the pie that they generate for the conference overall. Subscribe to us on youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. Follow us on the major podcasts. That's the easiest way for us to keep you up to date when big news happens and bring you analysis of the things that matter most around Clemson sports. One of the things that matters the most right now is the Clemson men's basketball team. They are on the bubble for the NCAA tournament. The final 2 regular season games of ACC play are going to matter a lot. There's been a resurgence the last couple of games, and every time I say that, it seems like there's a crash landing. The second half of the season has been a lot of ups and downs. Daniel, how do you see the team taking shape right now?
Well, we didn't record last week, so that was probably a good thing, because I might have had somebody fired after the struggles before the last couple of games. Look, I think they played great last week against Syracuse. I think the NC State win was probably the best win of the year on the road. NC State's a good team. They dominated that game really from start to finish. PJ Hall played great. Brevin Galloway played great. Hunter Tyson and Chase Hunter played really well. And they got some contributions from other guys as well. So I think if you'd have said at the start of the year, Daniel, when they enter the last weekend of the year, they could win the ACC regular season, would you take that? Well, hell yeah. I mean, we've only seen this program win the regular season once. We were there at that game. We know what that looks like.
Got that right.
In our freshman year of college. So, I mean, it's been forever since then, but this has been a good year. It's been a frustrating year at times because you saw what they can be this past week. Well, then how in the hell did they lose to Louisville? Right? How did they lose to South Carolina? How did they lose to Boston College and Loyola? And if you take those 4 games, and let's say you win 2 of them, Bill, they're not on the bubble. They're probably in the tournament.
Right.
But to lose those 4 games the way they did is what is the most frustrating part to me, because we've seen against Duke and against Pitt, who's in first place in the ACC, against NC State both times, against Syracuse last week. We've seen what this team can be. And for them to be on this bubble and really on the wrong side of the bubble is almost criminal because of what they could be. But, moving forward, they got Virginia Tuesday night. I think if they beat Virginia, they're back on the right side of the bubble, obviously, with another big win on the road. I do think, in my mind, the path to them getting to the tournament is either beat Virginia and win one other game, or lose to Virginia and you have to win 3 games, right? So a Virginia win plus one other win is 2. A loss to Virginia, that means you got to win 3 games. And that would mean beating Notre Dame and then winning 2 games in the tournament. And I think they get in.
Boy, you mentioned if you had told me at the start of the season, which is, a phrase that you hear a lot in sports, I would have been thrilled if you just said, let's just fast forward to right here and Clemson needs to win 3 more games and get in. Like, I would have taken that all day, every day, right? So that's, to me, as disappointing as the second half of this season has been, and some of it was injury-induced and some of it was not coping well with that situation, and some of it also was quality of opponents being stronger at that stretch of the year as well. Let's see how they can do. Like, let's see them go ahead and take these teams on, and the Tigers, as awful as that Louisville loss was, and it was, to quote John McEnroe, pits of the world, right? But maybe that's been the wake-up call for them to say, all right, now we have, the old cliche, backs against the wall. Like, you have no margin for error now. You have to be your best version of yourself the rest of the road. And we'll see if they can pull it off. We'll see what they can do. They have surprised me at times, pleasantly and poorly, throughout the second half of this season. And count me in rooting for top form from here on out and getting into the NCAA tournament.
Here's the deal, Bill. If they would have lost Saturday, they're done. I don't think they have a path to get into the NCAA tournament other than winning the ACC tournament. And that has never happened in the history of the program, so you can't count on that happening. But they showed up Saturday and played as well as they've maybe have played since Brad Brownell has been the head coach. I mean, if you think about it, that might have been as impactful a win as they've ever had in the regular season. I know they went to the Sweet 16 one year. I get that. I'm talking about in the regular season. That might be the biggest win that they've ever had with him as the head coach because of everything that's on the line. Look, if they don't go to the NCAA tournament, I think you're probably looking at a new head coach next year. I don't know how we get to that path. I don't know if he resigns. I don't know if he's let go, whatever. But, I mean, there were kind of expectations set at the start of this season that if this isn't a tournament team, there need to be some consequences for that. So, and I know, look, a lot of people have talked about the way the ACC is viewed and the disrespect towards the ACC. That's all well and good. If Clemson doesn't get into this tournament, it's their own fault because of the non-conference schedule. If you look at the non-conference schedule, they have one of the worst non-conference schedules in the country in the Power 6 conferences, if not the worst. And that's your own fault for scheduling that schedule. So it's not about the ACC. It's not about a lack of respect to the ACC. If they had played just an average non-conference schedule and still lost a couple of games and then done what they've done in the ACC, they wouldn't be on the bubble. They would be in the tournament. But their non-conference schedule is so laughably bad that they've been constantly having to try to overcome that, and they still haven't done quite enough to do that.
Hey, maybe someone with one of these schools with the big new payouts from their media rights deal suddenly needs a new coach and looks at the turnaround Brad Brownell has had this year. He may be in demand. There may be a difficult choice for him. There may be a difficult choice for Graham Neff. We'll see how it all plays out. I think the close of the ACC season overall has a lot of question marks, and I mean on the court. And I'm going to be thrilled to see all of it unfold. I think it's going to be a lot of must-see TV for the close of the hoop season.
I agree, and I think they can win Tuesday night in Virginia. If they play the way they played Saturday at NC State, I think they can beat anybody in the conference. So, we'll see what happens. If they win one more game, they'll have the double bye. They'll be in the quarterfinals in the conference tournament. And then you see what happens. I mean, you're really talking about winning 3 games at that point to win the ACC tournament. And it's like the old days. when there were 8 or 9 teams in the conference. I mean, Clemson has not played in the quarterfinals very much in a long time. It would be great to see them start their tournament on that Thursday and realize, hey, we win 2 or 3 games here. We could do something special, something that never has happened in this program's history.
Be sure to follow us on social media at Clemson Kickoff on Twitter and on Instagram. We can keep you posted with things between episodes. And sometimes you get a little taste of Crazy Daniel during the games as well, especially basketball.
Crazy Daniel is your friend. Do not ever think anything different.
Hey, it's heat of the moment venting, right?
That's right. I had none of that Saturday. I mean, start to finish, I was in a good mood Saturday. So let's hopefully that continues for a couple more games.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and get into football a little bit. And we have been doing position by position reviews of the 2022 season. And now it is time to get into the safeties. And the 3 main guys to discuss there are 3 players who I think are really talented. And I think we'll see all of them perform better next year than they did this last year. I think 2 of them had setbacks, and one of them we know injuries were a factor. Cross-training was a factor for him as well. That would be Andrew Makuba and also Jalen Phillips, who I loved how he stepped up in 2021. I think he took a little bit of a step back in 2022. I'm a big fan of the guy. That's why I think he'll be better next year. And I think we saw some more progression from R.J. Mickens as well at the safety position, and I'm really eager to see him get out there and take an even bigger step forward in 2023. And I have to hope that Mickey Kahn, after moving into a slightly different role on the defense this year, is going to be able to figure out a way to work with them a little more pointedly. Maybe in Makuba's case, again, that's just a matter of getting him healthy and maybe getting him refocused more on the safety position purely. If that all comes together, I would expect this to be one of the best safety groups in the Southeast.
I agree. I had really high hopes for this group last year, and there were reasons why they didn't get there. I mean, like you said, Makuba was hurt. Makuba was also playing a couple of different positions. It'd be great to see him, especially this spring, really focus on being a safety. And I know why they cross-trained him. I mean, they want him to help him in the NFL, and they were trying to get their best players on the field. All that stuff is true. But I'd love to see him just play safety and go get the ball, right? And we saw that his first year. Hopefully we'll see more of that this year as well.
Then you get into a guy like Sherrod Koval, who showed some promise as a true freshman. You get another off season of him in the program and all the talent he's got. He looked good in the snaps he was out there. Yeah, any freshman would not be perfect out there, right? But I'm really encouraged to see a little more from him. So you're talking again really about a 2 deep there with 4 guys that I trust moving into the next season. I was glad to see Koval get out there as much as he did, play as well as he did. I would have to say, though, like if you want me to give the group a grade overall, just on the results and not necessarily having anything to do in particular with the reasons behind them, B-. What do you think?
Yeah, pretty close. I thought they were solid. I thought they were good, but I think, Bill, they're hurt by the expectations, right? I had such high expectations for Makuba and the rest of this group that they didn't live up to that. But there's reasons why. I mean, injuries, other things like we've talked about. So I think B- is really fair.
Yeah, I mean, there were weeks where the safety play was not great. I mean, Wake Forest is one of them. The corners certainly were a problem, and that'll be the next group that we get into in the next episode. Hopefully it won't be such a long time between episodes again. That was totally my fault. Just some other priorities I had to make there. I apologize to everyone who was looking for info in between. I think the safety room maybe doesn't have the biggest impact on a better Clemson defense next year, but I do think it will be improved, and it may not be the key to becoming locked down once again, but I do think it's going to help things out.
Yeah, it felt like there were times where they tried to do too much and overplayed and didn't just do their job. Just do your job, right? And if they just do their job and are in position, there were a lot of busts last year. And we can look at the South Carolina game. We can look at the Tennessee game. There were some busts there. And without those busts, I think we give them a much bigger grade or a better grade. So hopefully they can get those things straightened out. That's just, how many times did we hear it? Do your job, fundamentals, assignments, all those things. I thought those are the kind of things that really held this group back in 2022.
Yeah, and when you compare them to 2021, like I think Makuba and Turner had some really physical safety play, and I think that's what Brent Venables always wanted in 2021. So then you go to 2022. Well, Makuba's dinged up. Makuba's playing some corner. The linebackers being asked to do different things. That means the safeties are seeing different things in front of them. Sometimes the edge doesn't get set. Sometimes a gap doesn't get filled. Think about the name of the position, right? Safeties have to be the guy who make up for the mistake, so to speak, or who make up for the soft spot in the defense if you're going to scheme a blitz, if you're going to scheme more coverage, if you're going to scheme more guys dedicated to the run out of your front seven, if you're going to put your corners on islands and man-to-man, the safeties have to get to the spot on the field that isn't covered. And how many times have we've been critical of Jerron Kearse and TJ Green still for that first title game out in Arizona against Bama and just letting OJ Howard exploit those things. Before that, it was Dalvin Cook sometimes would exploit those things in the running game. That's where you count on your safeties to come up, make big hits, cover a lot of ground. And I don't think we saw as much of that this year as I expected, regardless of expectation. That's where we need Mickey Conn and Wes Goodwin put their heads together, find more consistency for these guys, find ways to make sure that they know where they need to be. They need to know the areas of the field that they need to keep an eye on if the ball gets into those spots and be ready to make a play in a hurry. Check out our homepage, ClemsonKickoff.com. You can go back and find out where we were wrong and where we were right throughout the 2022 season as well. Let's go ahead and get into baseball in a very disappointing weekend after the season had opened with so much promise, but a sweep at the hands of UCF, which is no slouch of a program, I can tell you from living down here, but haven't had a huge national profile. Maybe not quite as disappointing as some people are making it out, but definitely a tough pill to swallow getting swept at home after such a nice start to the year for the Tigers under Eric Bakich.
It was ugly. I mean, there's no way around that. And look, UCF is a good team. They have a good program. They've done a good job there. I mean, I think they're probably a tournament team this year. But Clemson certainly helped UCF win those games this weekend. And the pitching was a huge struggle. I think the defense is still a struggle at times. Overthrown balls, errors, a couple of pickoff throws that were thrown in the outfield, the bad play on the bunt in the big game to wrap up the sweep. So there were some problems defensively for this team. Still some issues a little bit with hitting in clutch situations. But, Bill, it's going to take time, right? I mean, Eric Bakich just got there about a year ago. It's going to take time to fix all the problems that the previous staff left behind. You don't just fix those in 3 games. So, look, I would say I'd rather Clemson play like that last weekend than play like this weekend coming up against South Carolina. Get it out of your system and then hopefully play better against South Carolina. But it's going to take time. Be patient. I think they've got the right guy in place. They've got the right coaches around him. But they need to get the recruiting back on track. They need to get better focus within the program, all those things. And you can't just fix those in 3 games.
Yeah, defense and base running are going to be very important fixes to make during the course of the season. The hope would have been that more of that would have been fixed in the offseason. That's not something that you just flip a switch on. We're going to obviously see that continue to unfold. I mean, Clemson got away with some things against Binghamton too, right? But managed to cover that with a difference in talent level. So once you get into teams like UCF and South Carolina, you got to be firing on all cylinders. Maybe this is a little bit of a wake-up call for the baseball team, the way we're hoping that loss to Louisville by the men's basketball team perhaps was a wake-up call for them. Maybe this kind of gets them paying a little more attention in meetings. Bakich is very organized, great communicator, pays a lot more attention to those kind of things and the importance that they carry than apparently the last staff did by multiple things that I've read and heard about the baseball team in recent seasons. So let's see where it goes. But give them time. No excuses for the mistakes that have happened or more that may be to come. But let's see how the improvement curve goes going forward. And speaking of moving forward, tomorrow we're going to see freshman left-handed pitcher Tristan Smith get the start midweek for Clemson. See just how he looks against collegiate competition and maybe spot a little help on the weekends from him down the line as well.
I'm really excited about that, Bill. I saw him in the first series against Binghamton, and the ball just jumps out of his hand. Now, he's been a little erratic, a little sloppy, but maybe with a start, he can be a little more focused. But the talent is there. You can't deny the talent. So let's hope he has a good start Tuesday. Maybe he's in the weekend rotation before too long, and they get that pitching staff straightened out, because the pitching staff was a mess against UCF. Hopefully that is not the case the rest of the season.
Rated the number 6 freshman in the nation this preseason by Perfect Game. He's out of Boiling Springs, South Carolina. Measures 6'2", 200. So he's got the frame. We know he's got the ability. Let's see how he can apply it and what kind of glimpse might we get of what could be on the way from him. And maybe it's not just him among the freshman ranks. Maybe some other guys will start to increase what they can bring to the team. Maybe they can find a niche on the field and turn it into a true role as the season unfolds. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on with the Tigers as well. Again, hopefully not another sweep coming up anytime soon. But this is a fairly young team. This is a brand new staff, different ways of doing things. And hopefully I'm wrong, but I think some patience is going to be in order with these guys. Again, not to make excuses, but let's just deal in reality there.
And even Crazy Daniel can preach patience with the baseball team. So just be patient, give them some time, and I think that this staff will get this stuff straightened out. I really do think they've got the right staff in place.
Well, we will keep you posted on that as things unfold. We're going to try to come at you on Wednesday. There may be breaking news happening on Wednesday in Clemson's favor. We sure hope so. We will be prepared for that if it happens. We are glad you found us. Go ahead and subscribe on youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff, or follow us on the major podcast apps if that's where you listen. And until the next episode, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.